The twin suns of Thesha, 7 cast long shadows across the devastated landscape as Kai maneuvered his supply transport through the rubble-strewn streets. The war had officially ended 3 months ago, but nobody had bothered to tell the forgotten souls left behind on this remote colony moon. While the wealthy had evacuated to safer worlds, the poor, the alien, and the desperate remained among the ruins. Kai adjusted his worn leather gloves and checked his manifest again. Blankets, water purification tablets, protein bars, and medical supplies, the basics needed to keep people alive another day. As a freelance humanitarian coordinator, he'd seen enough suffering to last several lifetimes, but something about Thesha, 7 had called to him. Perhaps it was the way the authorities had simply written off the remaining population, or maybe it was his own need to believe that kindness still mattered in a universe that seemed increasingly cruel. The transport's engine coughed as he navigated around a collapsed building that had once been a marketplace. His sensors indicated minimal life signs in this sector, but experience had taught him that desperate people often hid where scanners couldn't detect them. He pulled to a stop beside what remained of a fountain, its ornate alien carvings now cracked and weathered. That's when he saw her. She emerged from behind a twisted piece of metal that had once been a transit kiosk, moving with the careful deliberation of someone who had learned to conserve every ounce of energy. Her skin was a pale purple that seemed to shimmer faintly in the dying light, marked with intricate tattoos that spoke of tribal heritage. Blonde curls framed a face that would have been beautiful if not for the hollow cheeks and desperate eyes that had lost their natural luminescence to hunger. She wore scraps, pieces of fabric that might have once been clothing but now served as little more than modesty coverings. Her bare feet were cut and dirty, and she clutched a thin shawl around her shoulders against the cold that came with Thesha 7's rapid nightfall. Kai's heart clenched as she approached his transport with hesitant steps. He'd seen that look before, the expression of someone who had been forced to make impossible choices just to survive another day. "Please," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, accented with the melodic tones of her species. "You can have me. My body. Just give me something to eat." The words hit him like a physical blow. She wasn't making an offer born of desire or even simple transaction. This was desperation in its purest form, a person so broken by circumstances that she believed her body was the only currency she possessed. Kai climbed down from his transport without saying a word. The woman flinched slightly, as if expecting him to immediately take what she'd offered, but instead he shrugged off his thermal jacket and gently draped it around her shoulders. The garment dwarfed her slight frame, but she clutched it instinctively. From his supply pack, he retrieved a sealed nutrition bar, a bottle of purified water, and a thermal blanket. He pressed them into her trembling hands, watching as her violet eyes widened with confusion. "You're not." She began, then stopped, as if afraid to voice the thought. "No," Kai said softly. "No one should have to trade themselves to survive." She stared at the supplies in her hands as if they were made of precious metals, then looked back at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Suspicion warred with hope in her features, and he could see her mind working, trying to understand what payment he might demand later. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Vera," she whispered, still clutching the blanket. "I'm Kai. And you don't owe me anything, Vera. Not now, not ever." Tears began to trace down her cheeks as she finally allowed herself to believe, if only for a moment, that kindness without cost might actually exist. When Kai gestured toward his transport and offered to take her somewhere warm and safe, she followed, not because she trusted him completely, but because she had no other choice but to hope. Kai's temporary shelter was a repurposed medical facility on the outskirts of what had once been Thesha 7's capital district. The building's structural integrity remained sound despite blast damage to its exterior, and he'd converted several rooms into living quarters while using the rest for supply distribution. The facility's backup power still functioned, providing heat and basic lighting, luxuries that had become precious commodities in the post-war wasteland. Vera hadn't spoken since they'd arrived 3 days ago. She ate the meals he provided in mechanical silence, her violet eyes constantly tracking his movements as if waiting for the inevitable demand for payment. She'd claimed a corner of the main room, building herself a small nest from blankets and cushions, and rarely ventured far from that space. Kai respected her silence, understanding that trust was something that had to be earned gradually. He went about his daily routines, cataloging supplies, planning distribution routes, maintaining equipment, while remaining carefully aware of her presence. He made sure she always had food within reach, clean water, and privacy when she needed it. On the fourth morning, he found her examining the faded tribal markings that decorated her forearms. The intricate patterns had been carved into her skin with traditional tools, then filled with bioluminescent ink that had dimmed with malnutrition but still held traces of their original beauty. "They're beautiful," Kai said softly, not wanting to startle her. Vera's head snapped up, her eyes wide with surprise. It was the first time he'd addressed her directly since bringing her to the shelter. "They mark me as Inari," she whispered, her voice rusty from disuse. "The Star-Touched clan. We were the navigators for the deep ships, before the war." Kai settled into a chair across from her, maintaining a respectful distance. "What happened to your people?" Her fingers traced the markings unconsciously. "Some fled to the core worlds when the fighting began. Others stayed to help evacuate the civilian populations. I was supposed to leave on the last transport, but..." She swallowed hard. "I stayed to help load the injured. The ship left without me." "I'm sorry," Kai said, and meant it. "I kept thinking someone would come back. That there would be another evacuation. But the weeks turned to months, and the months turned to..." She gestured helplessly at the world beyond the shelter walls. Kai leaned forward slightly. "How long have you been alone?" 8 months, she admitted. "Maybe 9. Time becomes meaningless when you're just trying to survive each day." The weight of her words settled between them. 8 months of scrounging for food, of hiding from scavengers and worse, of slowly losing hope that rescue would ever come. No wonder she'd been reduced to offering the only thing she thought had value. "You're not alone anymore," Kai said quietly. Vera's eyes searched his face, looking for deception or hidden motives. "Why?" she asked finally. "Why help me? You could have taken what I offered and left me there." "Most would have." Kai was quiet for a long moment, considering his answer. "Because I've seen what happens when people lose their dignity. When they're forced to trade pieces of themselves just to survive. It changes them, breaks something inside that can't always be repaired." He met her gaze steadily. "Everyone deserves better than that. Even aliens?" The question came out bitter, tinged with the pain of past rejections. "Everyone," Kai repeated firmly. "Species doesn't matter. Suffering is suffering, and kindness is kindness." For the first time since he'd found her, Vera smiled, a small, fragile thing, but genuine. "You're different from the others who came before." "Others?" Her expression darkened. "Traders, mostly. Scavengers looking for salvage ore." She didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. Kai understood perfectly. "You're safe here," he said, and something in his tone must have convinced her because she nodded slowly. That evening, Vera ventured out of her corner to help him prepare their meal. She moved with the fluid grace of her people, her movements economical and precise. As they ate together, she began to share small details about her life before the war, her work as a navigation specialist, her family's traditions, the festivals that had once lit up the night sky with bioluminescent displays. Kai found himself fascinated by her stories, by the glimpses of a rich culture that had been scattered to the winds by conflict. When she spoke of her people's beliefs about the stars and their role as guides between worlds, her eyes regained some of their natural luminescence. "You're a good listener," she said as they cleaned up after dinner. "You're a good storyteller," he replied, and was rewarded with another of those rare smiles. That night, Vera slept more peacefully than she had since arriving. Kai lay awake in his own bed, thinking about the woman who was slowly emerging from the shell of survival. He'd rescued many people over the years, but something about Vera's strength, her ability to maintain fragments of hope even in the darkest circumstances, stirred something deep within him. Tomorrow, he decided, he would ask if she wanted to help with the supply distribution. Not because he needed the assistance, but because he sensed she needed to feel useful again, to reclaim some sense of purpose beyond mere survival. As he drifted off to sleep, Kai couldn't shake the feeling that finding Vera had changed something fundamental in his own life as well. 2 weeks had passed since Vera first spoke of her people, and the shelter had begun to feel less like a refuge and more like a home. She'd taken to helping Kai with his daily routines, her navigator's precision proving invaluable in organizing supplies and plotting efficient distribution routes. More importantly, she'd begun to laugh again, small chuckles at first, then fuller expressions of joy that lit up her entire face. This morning, they were preparing for a supply run to the eastern settlements when Vera approached him with a question that had clearly been weighing on her mind. "Can I come with you today?" she asked, her hands fidgeting with the edge of her shirt, one of his spare garments that she'd altered to fit her smaller frame. Kai looked up from the manifest he was reviewing. "It might be dangerous. Some of the settlements have had problems with raiders." "I know," she said quietly. "But I need to see them. The other survivors. I need to." She struggled for the words. "I need to remember that I'm not the only one who's lost everything." He studied her face, seeing the determination beneath the lingering uncertainty. "All right. But you stay close to me, understand?" The journey to the eastern settlements took them through territory that had been heavily contested during the war. Burned-out vehicles and collapsed buildings dotted the landscape, grim reminders of the conflict's cost. Vera sat silently beside him in the transport, her violet eyes taking in the destruction with a mixture of sadness and anger. Their first stop was a small encampment that had grown up around a partially intact water processing facility. The survivors here were a mixed group, humans, Anari like Vera, and several other species who'd been caught in the crossfire of a war that had never truly been theirs. Kai watched as Vera interacted with the other refugees, her natural empathy drawing them to her like a magnet. She helped distribute blankets to the elderly, played simple games with the children, and listened patiently as the adults shared their stories of loss and survival. When they encountered a young Anari couple who'd lost their infant daughter to disease, Vera held the grieving mother while she wept, her own tears mixing with theirs. The tribal markings on both women's arms seemed to glow faintly in the dim light, a connection that transcended words. "She's remarkable," said Jorik, the settlement's unofficial leader, a grizzled human who'd been a colonial administrator before the war. "She's given these people hope just by being here, by showing them that survival is possible." Kai nodded, his eyes never leaving Vera as she worked. "She's stronger than she knows." Their second stop was more troubling. The settlement had been raided 2 days earlier, and several people had been taken, likely sold into slavery on the Outer Rim worlds. The survivors who remained were traumatized and suspicious, eyeing Kai and Vera with barely concealed hostility. "More do-gooders," spat an older human woman whose arm was in a makeshift sling. "Where were you when the raiders came? Where were you when they took my grandson?" Kai felt his jaw tighten, but Vera stepped forward before he could respond. "I don't know where we were," she said quietly. "But I know where we are now. And I know what it's like to have everything taken from you, to be left with nothing but the clothes on your back and the hope that tomorrow might be different." She rolled up her sleeves, revealing the faded tribal markings that marked her as one of the displaced. "I offered myself to a stranger for a piece of bread because I thought that's all I was worth. But someone showed me that I was wrong. That all of us are worth more than what we're forced to trade just to survive." The woman's anger faltered, replaced by something softer. "You're Anari." Star touched. "I was," Vera said. "Now I'm just someone trying to help." The settlement's mood shifted after that. People began to accept the supplies Kai offered, and some even shared information about the raiders' movements. As they prepared to leave, the woman with the injured arm approached Vera. "My grandson," she said hesitantly. "He's only 12. If you hear anything, I'll find him," Vera promised, and Kai could see that she meant it absolutely. The journey back to their shelter was quiet until Vera suddenly asked him to stop the transport. They were passing through a field of native flowers, purple blooms that seemed to echo the color of her skin in the fading daylight. "I used to pick these for my mother," she said, climbing down from the transport. "She'd weave them into crowns for the harvest festivals." Kai watched as she moved through the flowers, her movements graceful and purposeful. When she returned, she carried a small bouquet of the purple blooms. "For you," she said, offering them with a shy smile. "To thank you for showing me that kindness still exists." As Kai accepted the flowers, their fingers brushed, and he felt a jolt of electricity run through him. Vera's eyes widened, and he realized she'd felt it too, that spark of connection that went beyond gratitude or simple companionship. "Vera," he said softly, and she stepped closer, her face tilted up toward his. For a moment, they stood frozen in the field of purple flowers, the weight of possibility hanging between them. Then Vera placed her hand on his chest, feeling the rapid beating of his heart. "I've never felt safe enough to want someone," she whispered. "Not since the war. But with you." Kai's hand covered hers, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her skin. "We don't have to rush anything. We have time." "Time," she repeated, as if the word itself was a gift. "I'd almost forgotten what that felt like." They stood together as the twin suns set, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. For the first time in months, Vera felt truly seen, not as a survivor or a refugee, but as a woman worthy of love and desire. The walls she'd built around her heart were finally beginning to crumble. The evacuation transport arrived on a Tuesday morning, its hull bearing the insignia of the Galactic Relief Coalition. Kai had requested it weeks ago, knowing that many of the survivors he'd been helping would need passage to more stable worlds where they could rebuild their lives. Vera stood beside him as the ship touched down, her expression unreadable. Over the past month, their relationship had deepened into something neither had expected. Stolen moments of tenderness, her hand in his as they walked through the ruins, quiet conversations that lasted until dawn, the way she'd begun to reach for him in her sleep as if afraid he might disappear. "There's room for 50 passengers, Captain Thorne explained as she reviewed the manifest. "Priority goes to families with children, elderly, and those with medical needs. The ship's bound for New Avalon, good infrastructure, job opportunities, and they're actively seeking refugees to help with the terraforming projects." Kai nodded, making notes on his tablet. "I'll have the final passenger list ready within the hour." As the captain walked away to oversee the loading of supplies, Vera finally spoke. "You didn't put my name on the list." "I wasn't sure you'd want to go," Kai said carefully. "You've been so focused on helping the other survivors, I thought. You thought I'd choose to stay." Her voice was soft, almost wondering. "A month ago, I would have fought for a place on that ship. I would have done anything to get away from this place. And now?" Vera was quiet for a long moment, watching as families began to gather their meager possessions for the journey. "Now I'm not sure what I want." That evening, after the evacuation ship had departed with its cargo of hope-filled refugees, Vera found Kai sitting on the shelter's roof, staring up at the stars. The Inari had always been a people of the night sky, and her knowledge of celestial navigation had proven invaluable in coordinating supply drops with off-world relief organizations. "The constellation of the Navigator's Rest is rising," she said, settling beside him. "My people believed it was a sign of new beginnings." "Is that what this is?" Kai asked. "A new beginning?" "I don't know," she admitted. "I've been thinking about what you said that first night, about everyone deserving dignity. I've been wondering if maybe I deserve more than just survival." Kai turned to face her, his expression serious. "You deserve everything, Vera. Love, happiness, a future filled with possibilities. You deserve to choose your own path." "That's just it," she said, her voice growing stronger. "For the first time in my life, I am choosing. Not because I'm desperate or afraid or have no other options. But because this is what I want." She reached for his hand, intertwining their fingers. I want to stay here with you. I want to help rebuild this world, to make it a place where people don't have to trade their dignity for survival. Vera, Kai said, his voice rough with emotion. Are you sure? New Avalon would offer you safety, stability. I don't want safety, she interrupted. I want purpose. I want to matter. And I want to matter to someone who sees me as more than just a survivor. The space between them seemed to crackle with tension as they looked into each other's eyes. Kai lifted his free hand to cup her face, his thumb tracing the delicate line of her cheekbone. You matter to me, he said quietly. More than I thought possible. When their lips met, it was with the desperate hunger of two people who had found something precious in the ruins of their world. Vera's hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer as months of careful restraint finally gave way to need. I choose you, she whispered against his mouth. I choose this life we're building together. Later, in the privacy of their shared quarters, they made love with a passion born not of desperation but of genuine desire. Vera's pale purple skin seemed to glow in the soft light, her tribal markings tracing intricate patterns that Kai followed with his lips and hands. When she arched beneath him, crying out in pleasure, he knew that this was what he'd been searching for without even realizing it, this perfect union of two souls who had found each other in the darkness. Afterward, as they lay entwined in the narrow bed, Vera traced lazy patterns on Kai's chest with her fingertips. I love you, she said simply, as if the words were as natural as breathing. I love you too, he replied, pressing a kiss to the crown of her head. More than I've ever loved anything. Then we'll make this work, she said with the quiet confidence of someone who had finally found her place in the universe. We'll build something beautiful from all this destruction. As sleep claimed them, Vera's last conscious thought was of gratitude, not for being rescued, but for being seen, valued, and loved for exactly who she was. 6 months later, the settlement that had grown around Kai and Vera's shelter bore little resemblance to the ruins they'd first called home. What had started as a single repurposed medical facility had expanded into a thriving community of nearly 200 survivors from dozens of different worlds and species. Vera stood in the doorway of their expanded quarters, watching as Kai led a group of new arrivals through the settlement's orientation process. His natural leadership had earned him the unofficial title of settlement administrator, though he preferred to think of himself simply as someone who helped people find their footing in a new life. The housing assignments are posted in the main hall, he was explaining to a family of Centaurian refugees who'd arrived on the morning transport. Meals are communal, everyone contributes what they can, whether that's cooking, cleaning, or helping with food production. We found that shared responsibility builds stronger communities. A young Centaurian girl tugged on her mother's sleeve, pointing toward the school where human and alien children played together in the afternoon sun. Can I go to school here, Mama? Of course you can, sweetling, Vera said, approaching the family with a warm smile. I help teach the navigation and stellar cartography classes. Would you like to learn how to read the stars? The girl's eyes lit up with excitement, and her mother's expression softened with relief. It was a look Vera had seen countless times, the moment when someone realized they were truly safe, truly welcome, truly home. As the family was led away by one of the settlement's volunteer guides, Kai slipped his arm around Vera's waist, pulling her close. Good day, he asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. Every day is good when you're doing work that matters, she replied, leaning into his embrace. The supply shipment from New Avalon arrived this morning. They sent extra medical supplies and some of those solar collectors we requested. Excellent. Thane's been eager to expand the power grid. Kai's expression grew more serious. Any word from the search teams? Vera's face lit up with barely contained excitement. Actually, yes. Team 3 found the labor camp where they were holding the children taken from the eastern settlements. They're bringing them home. Including the old woman's grandson. Including Jorik's boy, yes. They should arrive by evening. Kai squeezed her tighter, marveling at how natural it felt to share both the burdens and joys of their work. What had begun as a simple humanitarian mission had evolved into something much more significant, a model for how different species could work together to build something better from the ashes of war. That evening, the settlement celebrated the return of the rescued children with a festival that blended traditions from a dozen different worlds. Bioluminescent flowers from Vera's homeworld were woven into garlands alongside Earth roses and Centaurian flame blossoms. The air filled with music that ranged from human folk songs to the harmonic frequencies favored by the crystalline Zalari. Vera found herself dancing with Kai beneath the stars, her tribal markings glowing softly in response to her joy. The scared, desperate woman who had once offered herself for bread felt like a distant memory, replaced by someone who knew her own worth and had found her place in the universe. "I have something for you," Kai said as the music slowed, reaching into his pocket to withdraw a small object that gleamed in the starlight. Vera gasped as she recognized the pendant, a traditional Inari navigation crystal, its faceted surface inscribed with the star charts of her people. "Where did you?" "I've been working with the crystal singers on Zalari Prime for months," he explained, fastening the chain around her neck. "They helped me create a new star map, one that shows not just where you came from, but where you're going." Tears sparkled in Vera's eyes as she examined the pendant. Instead of the traditional navigation routes between worlds, this crystal showed the path of their life together, the coordinates of their settlement, the routes of their supply runs, the location of every community they'd helped establish. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It's our story," Kai said, his hands framing her face. "All of it, the pain, the healing, the love we've built together. I want to spend the rest of my life adding new coordinates to that map." "Is that a proposal?" Vera asked, her heart racing. "It's a promise," he replied. "A promise that whatever comes next, we'll face it together. That we'll keep building something beautiful from the ruins, keep showing people that they're worth more than what they're forced to trade for survival." When Vera kissed him, it was with the passion of someone who had found not just love, but purpose. Around them, the settlement continued its celebration, but for these two souls who had found each other in the darkness, the only light that mattered was the one they carried together. Later that night, as they lay in each other's arms, Vera traced the scars on Kai's chest, marks he'd earned from years of dangerous relief work, while he mapped the constellation of freckles across her shoulders. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd been different that first day?" she asked softly. "If you'd taken what I offered?" "Never," Kai said firmly. "Because then we wouldn't have this. We wouldn't have each other, not really. Love built on desperation isn't love at all, it's just another form of survival. And what we have? What we have is choice," he said, his arms tightening around her. "Every day, we choose each other. Every day, we choose to build something better than what we found." As sleep claimed them, Vera's last thought was of the navigation crystal resting against her throat. For the first time in her life, she knew exactly where she belonged, not just in space, but in time, in purpose, and in the arms of the man who had shown her that true worth could never be traded away. Their story had become legend in the settlement, proof that even in the darkest times, kindness could triumph over desperation, and love could bloom in the most unlikely places. But for Kai and Vera, it was simply the beginning of a life built on the radical notion that everyone deserved dignity, respect, and the chance to be loved for exactly who they were. The stars above Thesha 7 shone a little brighter that night, as if the universe itself was celebrating the triumph of hope over despair.